Good evening, ladies. It's an honor to have been asked by Goldie to share some short thoughts pre-Rosh Hashana. And I am aware that there is mostly a room full of new moms who are going to be spending their first Rosh Hashana with small babies, but that may not be the case for everyone. And even if you are spending Rosh Hashana with bigger kids, this is addressed to you. It's also a big favor for me because starting to think about Rosh Hashana has got me thinking and started plugging me in as well. So thank you for the opportunity to start getting into the zone at this point in time. So if we think about Rosh Hashana, Rosh Hashana is associated with the new year. Rosh Hashana is associated with a day of judgment. And both of those are true, but both of those are probably slightly misunderstood. If Rosh Hashana could be described in 3 words, those 3 words would probably be love, potential, and life. So in order to understand that, let's understand what the concept of a day of judgment means. The reason why that we probably bristle at that concept of a day of judgment is because nobody likes to be judged. We don't like to be judged by teachers or bosses or certainly not peers. But there is also a very positive element to the concept of judging. You know, the people who probably judge us the most are our parents. They judge us in every aspect of our lives in terms of what are we eating, where are we going, what we're wearing, who we're being friends with. And their perspective when they judge us is not because they want to find the bad in us, but because they care so much about us and they love us so much that they want to make sure that we're getting the best. So while from a child's perspective, it can sometimes feel very intrusive to be judged by a parent, from a parent's perspective, the reason that they're interested in virtually every detail of our lives is because what they're saying is, the message is, I care about you and I love you. And if a parent didn't judge any aspect of their child's life, then there'd be a very loud and clear message, I don't care about you enough. And that's the worst message you could ever give a child. So the truth is that the concept of judgment and a day of judgment, we have to shift this idea of not Hashem sitting in judgment, waiting to punish us, waiting to sort of lash out at us, but rather the idea that He cares about every single one of us. He cares about the way that we live our lives. He cares about the details, and that therein lies the concept of judgment, because He cares about the potential that He gave us, and He wants to make sure that we are actualizing that potential. So there's a very empowering idea about being judged on that day, because the real question is, are you using everything I've given you to become your best self? And that Hashem really cares about little old me. Amongst everybody else, Hashem really is zoning in on me and cares about me. So that's the concept of the day of judgment and the idea of love. That number one, the first word to describe this day of judgment, this new year, is the idea of love. The judgment comes from love. Number 2 is the idea of potential. So if you think about what it is that we're celebrating on Rosh Hashana, what is the celebration? The celebration is the birth of mankind, the beginning of humankind. Now, Hashem has power to do whatever. So He could have begun mankind with a village, with a nation, but He purposely chose to begin mankind with Adam, with one lone human being, in order to teach us the value of one lone human being. That means that there is value in the individual, because every individual has unique potential that nobody else has. And that means that Rosh Hashana is kind of, again, keeping us in check as to whether we are meeting that potential or not. That there is value in my unique individual actions and the way I am conducting my life. Am I using my potential? Every Rosh Hashana is kind of like a vote of confidence from Hashem saying, I believe in you. Do you believe in you? And number 3 is the concept of life. We talk about Rosh Hashana as being given, being written in the book of life, being sealed in the book of life, wishing people that they, are written inside the book of life. What are we talking about when we say that? Of course, on a superficial level, what we're saying is we'd like practical life. We'd like another year of life. But on a deeper level, what we're saying is not just life. We don't want to just exist. That's not the reason that we're here, is just to have another year of life. What are you going to do with that next year of life? How are you going to maximize the gift that we've been given of this next year of life? So we want to have a year ahead of taking that life that we've been given and bringing magic into it, using it for everything that has been given to us, that we have the ability to kind of infuse it with, the values that we have, the ideals that we have, the choices that we have, the dreams that we have, and to fill our days with life, not just with living, not just with existing. So now that we've summarized the concept of Rosh Hashana and how we're approaching Rosh Hashana as, it's not just about Hashem sitting on high, casting judgment. It's about love. It's about potential. It's about life. That's the space that we need to move into Rosh Hashanah with. And also remembering that if you look at the davening of Rosh Hashanah, the davening of Rosh Hashanah is about glorifying and crowning Hashem's kingship. That it's all about who Hashem is, recognizing who Hashem is, and placing that in relation to who I am. So it's true that the context of Rosh Hashanah is a lot of davening. It's true. And it is nice when we get the opportunity to daven. But for those of you who have never had a Rosh Hashanah with a baby before, you may be very surprised to discover that you don't get a huge amount of davening in. And truthfully, when you've got bigger children, maybe even less so, because there's less sleeps in the day, and you may find that you spend a lot of Rosh Hashanah down on the floor playing Lego. So how do we put that into the right perspective? How do we feel like our Rosh Hashanah has been holy? How do we feel like we've connected? Yes, we're kind of sitting in the space of, it's not about judgment in that way. It's about love. It's about potential. It's about life. So truthfully, in this moment when I'm sitting with my kids playing Lego on the floor, I'm being judged with love. Am I using my potential and doing the job that I'm supposed to be doing right now? That's one way to kind of look at it. Now, I can't take credit for this, but I did read an idea that somebody shared on a acrostic for the concept prayer, that each of those words stands for something. And I thought this is something nice to kind of dwell on. The idea of positivity, rachmanus, ambience, yearning, everything is from Hashem, and return. Those are the letters of prayer. So I think it's nice to dwell for a second on what each of those concepts mean, because ideally what we want to be spending our day doing is praying. But there's something underlying the idea of praying which we can still invest in even if we don't get to open up our machzor the whole day. What are those ideas? So the number one is positivity. Is that the way we need to approach our prayer and the way we need to approach davening, I guess, all the time and on Rosh Hashanah is from a place of positivity. And that's something that we can work on year round. And even on Rosh Hashanah, even in the minutes that we don't get to open up our machzor, is being in a positive headspace, is looking forward to the next year with positivity. Then there is the idea of rachmanus, which means compassion or mercy. Whenever we're going to ask Hashem for anything, when we approach Hashem on Rosh Hashanah, and always, we're asking Him to incorporate mercy into any judgment that He gives us. And in the same way, in order for that to happen, we also need to be people who are merachem, full of rachmanus. We need to be having rachmanus on others. And I think that's really important in the role as mothers, is that, standing for 5 hours davening while your kid is crying in the corner is not rachmanus. If you want Hashem to mirror that rachmanus back on you, then that is fulfilling the role that you have in that moment as mother. And that might mean lunchtime and giving everybody their food while you're playing whatever it is that you're playing with them. That it's incorporating this idea of rachmanus into the day, even when you're not davening. Maybe especially, in that space. The A is the idea of ambiance, which is when we're at home with our kids, instead of thinking, this is not the place I'm supposed to be, this is not the holiness that it's supposed to be, I'm not in the, this is not the time to daven or to speak to Hashem. We need to look around at our surroundings and understand that it's exactly where Hashem wants us in this moment. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So the question is, what ambiance are we creating for our children? And what about that ambiance are we using to benefit us in coming closer to Hashem? Are we looking around and moaning, or are we saying, thank God this is what I have, and I will make it a place to daven and speak to Hashem in a way that I know He wants? And maybe it's not going to be all be from the machzor, but it's also the way I'm conducting myself today, and my thoughts and the words that I'm directing to Hashem, even when it's not in the context of the machzor. Why is the idea of yearning? And this is something that I recommend you take a little bit of time out if you can, even if it's while you're feeding your baby in the middle of the night, and just something you want to dwell on for a few minutes, is what are you yearning for? What are the hopes and dreams that you have for this coming year? Privately, for you, for your spouse, for your child, for your children. This is something to kind of think about pre-Rosh Hashanah and be able to sort of, when you have moments in the davening, to be able to verbalize and focus on. E is that everything is from Hashem, which means that everything amazing and good and awesome and everything bitter and difficult and painful actually all comes from one place. We have to internalize that. We have to put it into our daily way of thinking as we're sitting home with our kids, while we're playing with them, while we're feeding with them, and in those moments that we get to daven. So we ask of Hashem on this day that everything that we receive in all of those areas and more is His will, but accepting that His will is also where you find yourself right now. And R, the last letter of prayer, is return, which is Rosh Hashana is a time to return to the beginning of the year, the beginning of our spiritual state of being. Doing Teshuvah returns our soul to its natural source. We are all born with a pure soul that knows only happiness and only knows how to receive Hashem's love. So use this time, even when you're not dwelling in your machzor, to return your thoughts to where they once were, or to where they should be, which is goal-oriented, positive, full of hope, and I think realistic in those goals. You know, when we have little babies, the things that we can possibly achieve this coming year are not going to be like what we can maybe achieve in 5 years or 10 years, but this is where we are now, and this is where we're supposed to be, so focusing on that. We're asking Hashem on Rosh Hashana to return us to a state where we can tune into goodness with positivity, shed our sort of skepticism and plug in again. And that's something that we can work on even when we're not engaged in formal tefillah. It's just being in that positive, goal-oriented, future-looking, love-filled space. So again, that's something to think about. And I will end off with an idea which I think is probably the most sort of powerful thing we need to be focusing on during Rosh Hashana, and when we're in this space where we're looking after kids and we're maybe not able to step into shul at all. And if it's the first Rosh Hashana you've ever spent like that, it's a little bit of a shock to the system, because it doesn't feel like you are where you're supposed to be, and you may feel kind of shortchanged that you didn't get to engage with Rosh Hashana in the way that you're supposed to engage with Rosh Hashana or Yom Kippur. But we can speak about that one another time. But this idea that you've kind of like doing a lesser job. So the first thing that I think that we need to sort of get into the headspace of is that raising and instilling Jewish values in children is at least as important as prayer. And that, you know, the place that we find ourselves, again, is where we're meant to be. So I think it's a powerful story of one of our forefathers, of Avraham, who, when Hashem commanded him to circumcise himself when he was 99 years old, it was obviously a very difficult test for him. And it was a way of him marking himself as fundamentally different from the rest of mankind. And it went against his nature and his dominant trait of chesed and of kindness and of wanting to be able to give. And after this experience of having his bris, he rose to new spiritual heights and merited prophecy that was beyond anything he'd ever experienced before. Now, in the midst of Avram communing with Hashem and sort of being one-to-one with Hashem, he sees 3 nomads traveling through the desert. And he immediately asks Hashem if he can just kind of hold on while he tends to his guests. And Avram then proceeds to engage in the most mundane tasks, from washing off his guests' feet to slaughtering and serving meat. And if you look at the story at a superficial glance, it actually seems ridiculous. Like, here he is, engaged one-on-one with Hashem. And in that moment of one-to-one, he kind of like steps aside and says, I hope you don't mind if I kind of take care of my guests. How can he pause mid-conversation with the Almighty and stop this sort of like intense prophetic experience to care for 3 passers-by in the most basic and menial way? So maybe Avram didn't consider that decision as illogical or irreverent, because he realized a very profound truth which we often struggle with. And I think in this moment in Rosh Hashana with children, this is something we may struggle with, which is, it is definitely holy to speak to Hashem, but it is the ultimate holiness to be like Hashem. And the way that we imitate Hashem isn't actually through prayer or meditation or some other kind of lofty spiritual activity, but actually really through the messy, difficult, painstaking work of nurturing, giving, and caring for others. So to be godly means to practice selflessness and patience. And that is lofty in and of itself. It is definitely safe to say that Hashem knows what is best for each person and what their needs are in terms of their spiritual development in every unique stage of life. And if your life stage and circumstance guides you towards the shul, then take advantage of it and tune into the unique benefits and joy of being in a space of communal davening, of prayer, where you can kind of be in that lofty space of feeling everybody davening around you and really plugging in. But if life right now guides you towards home and what seems like the mundane, and maybe spending the day changing nappies and playing Lego on the floor, then that is not a space to despair in, because jump at the opportunity that you've been given and the unique privilege to be emulating Hashem in a very profound and deep way. So staying at home is not second best. It is best for you right now, and that is the space that you are going to find to connect your kids, to not lose patience, to have rahmanas, to focus with positivity, to create a beautiful atmosphere in your home, to daven from a machzor when you're able to daven from a machzor, but when you don't, to not feel frustrated. Hashem has put you exactly where you are on purpose. He's not expecting you to somehow find a way around that. He wants you to take what you've been given right now and maximize it. I hope that that's a little bit of a guideline to be able to plug into Rosh Hashana in a meaningful way. I wish each of you a Rosh Hashana of meaning, of focus, of special time with your kids, of maybe helping them plug into the idea of Rosh Hashana if they're big enough, but of not feeling shortchanged in any way, of feeling like you are exactly where you're supposed to be, and that it should be uplifting and connected and make you ready to enter the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah straight after that and move towards Yom Kippur, and that all of us should be blessed with being written into the book of life, and not just existing but living life to the maximum, and that it should be a year of bracha and joy and happy, healthy families for all of us.